This is the land. Much of it still just the way they found it. It's the land of promise, and promises fulfilled. I guess a writer would call those fields and mountains the stuff from which dreams are made. Yes, we can have the dream they dreamed if we can just look past today, if we're willing to see the real truths of the past. My grandfather knew this land and loved it. But today we know it's a land with a greater future than he ever dared dream, with all his vision and courage. A great future, that is, if my generation is willing to act, before our time runs out. The dream they dreamed, Grandfather and those who dreamed with him, is our dream, too. I guess it took a dream to wake me up. When did I wake up? It started when my son Jimmy put me on the spot with some questions about our state constitution.
Say, Dad, what do you know about our constitution?
Constitution. Great document. Great. Thomas Jefferson...
No, I mean our state constitution. We're studying it at school.
State constitution. Well, that's a great document, too. Your great-grandfather helped write it, you know. Guess I hadn't realized it was this wordy.
Is Granddad in his room?
Your granddad? Yes, I guess so. Why?
Well, after all, it was his father that helped write this Constitution. At least I'll be one generation closer to getting some help with my homework. Look, Dad, an 1889 silver dollar. Granddad gave it to me. He said no use giving it to you, because you don't have a coin collection like I do. Anyway, Granddad said you already have enough dollars.
Oh, he did he? And what else did your grandfather have to say?
He said it was the year we became a state. And he said his father, your grandfather, helped write our state constitution.
That's right. And you can be pretty proud of your great-grandfather. And your grandfather, too, of course.
Granddad says they did a pretty good job writing our Constitution, everything considered. But he says if they could have looked into the future, they would have wrote some parts different.
Would have written some parts differently. They would not have written it any differently. Now see here, Jimmy, your grandfather knows a lot of things, but he's no expert on state constitutions.
Was his father? I mean, after all, he helped write the Constitution. Was he an expert? Had he ever written a constitution before?
Well, not exactly an expert on constitutions. Matter of fact, he was a farmer. A good one. But those men knew what the problems of the state were, and they wrote a constitution to last a long, long time.
How long?
A long time.
Granddad says it's about time we bring our constitution up to date. Granddad says if he knows his pa, he'd want folks to change it before now. Granddad says if folks don't wake up pretty soon, by the time us kids grow up, it's going to be an albatross around our necks. What's an albatross?
Granddad says. Listen, Jimmy, that Constitution wasn't written to be tampered with. We should show our respect for your great-grandfather and the other wise men who drafted that Constitution. I'm surprised that your granddad would... Well, never mind. Why don't you run along and do your homework?
Okay, Dad. Will you lock up my silver dollar in your tin box? Don't lose it.
Sure, I'll take care of it.
Granddad says his dad was a real good farmer.
Jimmy? Jimmy?
Jimmy's gone someplace.
No, Jimmy, I was talking to you. Or would you rather I'd called you J.B., as you've come to be known?
What? Who? What? Who are you? No, it can't be.
Now, Jimmy, just hold on.
But grandfather, you died.
Yes, Jimmy, I did. Quite a few years back. But it seems there's something that needs straightening out. So I came back. Just for a bit. Now, Jimmy, you can help. But you're sure not helping with the whoppers you tell that boy of yours about the Constitution we put together when we were trying to get to be a state.
Whopper? But grandfather, that Constitution was a wonderful piece of work.
Oh, tolerable good, I reckon. We tried to use common sense. We tried to write in some protections in case folks should decide to get too rambunctious. But that was just the trouble.
Trouble?
Yep. I guess we thought we were a whole lot smarter than anybody born later would ever be. So we put some limits on what kind of a state you could have.
But those protections were necessary.
Some of them made sense. Some were downright ridiculous. One good thing, folks went right ahead in spite of some of those dang foolish clauses. Just ignored them.
Ignored them?
Sure did. Like that line that forbids the state from going into debt over $400,000. Shucks. Some of us didn't know there was that much money in the world. You'd have never been able to get anything done if you'd held yourselves down to the limits that we thought that you ought to follow.
There were some changes.
Oh, sure. Haphazard ones. 48 of them, in fact. Yes, it's been tampered with. That old Constitution started looking like my britches the time I tried to patch them when your grandmother was gone. Some of the patches only made things worse.
Grandfather, what is so important about changing that Constitution?
Well, for one thing, it just don't fit the conditions today. It's holding back progress. For another thing, it just isn't a fair bargain for all citizens. Some folks are getting a mighty dirty deal, whether they know it or not. But the important thing, it's keeping folks from doing what needs to be done to take care of the needs of your children and their children and the thousands of new folks coming into this state these days. Other states are moving forward in many areas because they have revised their outdated constitutions.
Are you talking about more taxes?
Maybe for some folks. Maybe quite a bit less for others. In any case, a fairer system for everybody. And removing those dang foolish restrictions that will be holding you back more and more as your state tries to move ahead. Jimmy, let me show you what I'm talking about. Here's a nice park. It can be like this 25 years from now, or can it be like this? Do you know what kind of future lies ahead for many of Washington's sparkling rivers, lakes, and streams? Pollution and ruin. Unless folks like you are willing to do something about that albatross you're hanging around little Jimmy's neck. And this isn't 25 years from now. This is today. You can take credit for these inadequate 20th century classrooms, J.B. You and other civic leaders who refuse to let our precious Constitution be tampered with. You ask about taxes. See this house? This lady, under the system you think is so great, pays the same property taxes as this gentleman pays on this home. Both citizens of the same state. Do you think the trend towards higher and higher sales tax makes sense? As you know, the smartest economists in the country have predicted that this state is headed for a 9 or 10% sales tax unless something is done about tax reform soon. Do you think this trend makes sense? Or election regulations that make it possible for the minority to win? That's a mighty odd kind of democracy. You're pretty smug about your fine state, aren't you, Jimmy? Well, it is a fine state, and you have much to be proud of. But there's much to do. And for your generation, Jimmy, time is running out. The problems you read about today, or turn your back on, are just a sample of what that boy of yours will be saddled with. Time he grows up. Unless you do something about that 1889 Constitution. That was a day's wages at the time that Constitution was adopted. That is, if the man was lucky. We'd hoped someday that there would be gravel roads across our state. Roads a horse and buggy could travel. And schools. All the way to the 8th grade. We never dreamed that what would come to pass in this marvelous state of ours. Amazing things. No, we didn't dream. We couldn't know. But you know what's ahead. Or you have a darn good idea. And you can help shape the future. An opportunity we didn't have. No, we couldn't dream. But you can.
Took a dream to wake me up.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why I'm here this evening. We cannot ask our children to shoulder this unfair burden. For our generation, time is running out. We can and must act now to change the inequitable sections of an archaic constitution. We must make it possible to solve the serious problems and unfair conditions that exist today. Developments that couldn't possibly have been foreseen by those who wrote our Constitution. If we fail to act, these problems will be far more serious in a few more years. We have an advantage over those who drafted our Constitution. They couldn't dream what the future held in store for this state. We can.
What can you do? You can join the hundreds of others who recognize that Washington, like other states that have faced similar problems, must have a constitution that meets the needs of today. One that will make it possible to reverse the trend toward more unfair taxes, at the same time providing funds needed for parks, schools, streets, and other urgent needs of this fast-growing state. What can you do? You can join your local volunteer committee, help mail or distribute literature, explain to your friends and neighbors that constitutional revision is the first step toward accomplishing our state's objectives. Washington, like other states, can change its outdated constitution with your help.